Hello everyone, it is time to introduce to you the very last team going to Ascension Pacific. It's going to be our representatives from Japan. Now, most of you have probably heard by now or seen yourselves just how popular Valorant Esports is in Japan. You've probably seen the full crowds, the roars, whether it's Masters Tokyo or Challengers Finals, the fans absolutely show up. However, the region overall hasn't really been able to perform up to that same level, right? The same expectations for quite some time. Sure, Scars last year's did make a splash at Ascension Pacific, but they were looking strong right up until the finals where they lost 3-0 to Bleed Esports. Now, a new team is looking to bring the spotlight right back to Japan. And when I say new, we mean like brand spanking new team. It's RIDDLE Order. Before we get into the roster, let's introduce RIDDLE Order just a little bit. RIDDLE Order is an esports organization founded by a YouTuber and streamer in Japan going by the name of Vodka. They started RIDDLE Order as a Call of Duty clan quite a few years back and then expanded into esports in 2017, and for the most part, the main platform has been Apex Legends. However, at the end of 2023, they announced a huge step into Valorant with a brand new roster looking to compete in Challengers Japan. What's more is they were actually going to pick up the core of the Zeta Division Academy roster along with their coach as its foundation. So they are brand new to the Valorant scene, but obviously the following and the brand name has been around for quite some time within the gaming space within Japan. Now let's take a look at the roster that is going to Ascension Pacific in Jakarta. Here are your 5 players. You got Soldam, Caedye, JoXJo, Ace, and Yatsuka. For those wondering, Caedye, Ace, and Yatsuka are the 3 members that were brought in from the Zeta Division Academy roster. Now, I know for some of you Zeta Division fans out there, you're probably looking at these players and where they're at right now, or maybe you've watched some other games and it might hurt a little bit, but just rest assured that they were too young to participate in VCT prior, right? So these were talent that Zeta Division, or Zeta Division Academy, I guess, had scouted, and now they were picked up by RIDDLE Order, being given a chance to compete as a team in Challengers, and now of course having a shot to try to get into VCT Pacific as well. Let's take a look at the roles though in order. So starting with Soldam, kind of the primary duelist, but really what we're gonna see here is that it's a division depending on the agent and the map. So Soldam is their go-to jet player, but outside of that has been flexing around a little bit on things like the Gecko. And some of you might remember him as a player on Detonation Focus Me last year on DFM during their very unsuccessful year of 2023. Maybe some of you remember him as a star duelist on Northeption way back when, but also the OGs will know that Soldam is the original Korean jet, right? That's what he was known as on YouTube with his flashy highlights, with the Blade Storm, things like that. And he's still playing now flexing around on a couple different roles, but as you can see, the jet is still his. Next up, you have Caedye. So Caedye's clearly the one that's picking up the raise. So if you have a jet, okay, you still trust Soldam. He's the OG. He's got the jet pat down. That's great. But when you're going to the race, you're giving Caedye, who used to be a very strong duelist himself, playing that raise. And then otherwise, he's also flexing around onto these other initiators. So they kind of split that, right, between the duelist and then the secondary initiator to help kind of flesh out the compositions, make sure that they have that info tooling, right? Especially these days with the Gecko, you have a lot of utility there. You can still do things like the opping and take some aggressive stances. So that's Caedye's role. Then you have JoXJo, someone that if you've been following the scene, especially within Asia for a while, you'll know him as a very respectable IGL. And being that IGL, he's going to be playing a lot of those initiators, very primarily flash initiators, but also basically the primary initiator, right? Getting whatever hard info. If it's a single initiator, it's going to be JoXJo. If it's someone who's setting up with the flashes, it's going to be JoXJo. So he's filling that role. Then you have Ace, who is going to be the go-to primary controller. And last but definitely not least, you have Yatsuka, who is going to be their anchor and lurker, mostly playing the Sentinel, but obviously Viper kind of sneaks their way in there a lot of the time. So yeah, nothing too funky about the roles. Obviously, just a little bit of swapping back and forth on the duelist depending on the agent. But hey, if you kind of trust in the process of the comfort agent, I'm okay with that. We should also note that Split was their best map in Split 2. Kind of carrying them through a lot of the advanced stage to get into Split 2, and then the round robin stage as well before it was phased out of the map pool. So there they were playing double duelists, so obviously that kind of accounts for the agent picks here as well, and just how dominant it is for both of them, so it makes it look like they should be playing double duelists on every map. But that was reserved for the split, and then other maps it's kind of like Jet, it's Soldom, and then Raze it's going to be Caedye. I do just want to mention, again, for those maybe who haven't been following a lot, we actually got to catch a brief glimpse of Caedye and Yatsuka last year at Red Bull Homegrounds. So both of them had been playing as stand-ins at that event for Zeta Division, as Depp was stepping away for a vacation. And I'm going to go ahead and say Yatsuka didn't really catch my eye, but Caedye made absolute highlights happen during that event. I mean, you could just tell that he was playing so aggressively. He was doing a lot for that team during that event. And yes, it's an off-season event. I'm not saying that he would have performed, better than like every other duelist in Pacific or anything like that, but it just looked so promising. And Yatsuka didn't exactly have the same type of performance, but we did get to watch him play as well, whereas Ace was kind of a hidden card, so to speak, for the Zeta Division Academy roster, and you only really got to see him go through his debut once Riddle Order entered Challengers. So this is a team where you have two Korean players who, by the way, are quite fluent in Japanese, as they have both been active in the Japanese scene for so long as well. So they are very well experienced. They're veterans of the scene. They've been playing in Japan, so they're ingrained into that system. They have a fan base there as well. And then you're bringing in fresh, new, raw, cracked talent from the Japanese scene to add on to a little bit of that veteran leadership. And I think the leadership works out great because you have JoXJo, who is a reliable IGL, and he's proven that time and time again. And then you have someone like Soldom, who can just kind of take the reins, especially if he's on the Jet, and say, okay, fine, like I'll do it. I'll make the plays happen. I'll buy us a couple rounds. I'll buy us some time. And I think that's such a good environment for, some young players to have, where they can just rest assured, like, okay, our big bros have our back. We can really try to play to our comfort. We can play to our best ability and see how far we can go. And I would say that all three of the former Zeta Academy players should be hyped up in their own rights, right? Whether it's just pure aim mechanics, whether it's the game sense they have, whether it's the ability that they're able to kind of fill into the system. Like all these players have some strong characteristics where you can tell why they were scouted as upcoming talent. And it's very, very clear to me that they are meant to be at the forefront. They're kind of meant to be part of that front banner of the next generation of Valorant pros from Japan. And now you're adding them on to veterans of the scene, and then you get Riddle Order. Last but not least, I do want to give a quick shout out to their head coach, Vorz. As I looked into Vorz's content actually last year when Zeta Division had picked up Huron and Euron. And Huron also having formerly been part of Zeta Division Academy, Vorz, who used to be the Zeta Division Academy coach, obviously knew a lot about them. And I had seen some Japanese community posts and things like that where they talked about what Vorz has said about these players and his thoughts on these players going into Zeta Division, things like that. So I looked up his content on YouTube, and while I am definitely not fluent at all in Japanese, I understand like zero Japanese. What I could glean from his content was that he had a pretty good head on his shoulders about how to coach players, like not just in terms of the gameplay itself, which also he seemed to be very eager to dive into academically, because whenever he was allowed to, he was willing to like co-stream scrims and kind of share that with the overall community as well and educate people, but also the way he would talk about even helping out the Zeta Division players with their mental, things like that. It was very clear that he cared about the players, the team, but also, the growth within the game as well. So I was always kind of excited to see what he might be able to do when he's given a chance to coach his own team continuously through a league. And now he's done just that. Now let's talk about the road that Riddle took, because it actually wasn't that simple. First off, it starts with a bang. They announced the roster at the end of 2023 to a lot of hype. The announcement video is actually kind of sick. And back then, it was with Malfin and not JoXJo. They started with Malfin, and also JoXJo was actually part of DFM very briefly before the season even started. So obviously, he couldn't be part of Riddle Order. And, it looked like a fun project. But personally, when I saw the video, I was like, okay, this is kind of hype. I'm excited for this. And also learning about Riddle Order being an organization that was built up by a streamer. Like, this is all very cool. Like, this is going to bring more eyes to the Challenger scene. This is going to bring a lot more attention. And they're giving these Academy players a chance to now shine in professional or official matches. That's very cool, but I didn't exactly have that much faith because we hadn't seen that much from the Academy players. Like, yes, I was hyped about Caedye after Red Bull, but, that was like 1-2 games. And then Seldom is still pretty good, but obviously not as dominant as he used to be. Where back in the day, you were like, well, Seldom can play Jett on any map and he'll just hard carry whatever team he was on at a regional level. And that's just not the same anymore. So I thought that's a cool project. Like, I'd love to see where it goes. I'd love to see what Coach Vorz is able to do with them. And I'd love to see the talent grow. But, it's not like I was thinking, wow, this is a contender for Ascension. I just thought it would have been a cool story to follow. Now, to a lot of people's disappointment, they actually don't even get into challengers initially through the qualifiers for Split 1, losing to Mirage Gaming in a revenge match. And now that means they would have had to grind through Premier to have another shot to get into Split 2. Amidst that grind, they do pick up JoXJo as a new IGL. And once they get into that tournament stage of Premier, the advanced stage to get into Split 2, the rampage begins. This team goes on a 9-match win streak all the way through the halfway point of Split 2, dropping only 2 maps in the process. And all of these initial matches in the beginning of Split 2 included the top 3 seeds of Split 1 within Challengers Japan. So it's not like they were going up against, relatively weaker opposition. They do suffer a 2-0 loss against Scars in the middle of the season, but right afterwards, RIDDLE picks up where they left off, and they continue on a win streak all the way to the grand finals. Split 1 champions Fennel comes up from the lower bracket to try to defend their throne and secure that ticket to VCT Ascension Pacific. Now, does anybody remember the Game Changers 2023 championships last year where a fun little team called Team SMG was playing and they didn't realize it was a ping check, or they didn't realize it was an official match rather, and they thought it was a ping check? See, I guess this is how it happens. And they locked in 4 duelists on Lotus. And not duelists you see every day. And then they won? Like, they actually just battered their opponents with 4 duelists? Well, yeah. Fast forward to the middle of the summer of 2024. And we have RIDDLE Order playing in the most important match of the year so far for them, because it's a chance to get into Ascension, which would give you a chance to get into VCT Pacific. And they make the same exact mistake. They lock in 3 controllers and ciphers, who a lot of smokes, a lot of hiding info, and then a nice little ISO to just frag out. And no, this wasn't an intended composition. It was kind of confusing because they hadn't played Haven, so everyone was like, whoa, like, what have they cooked up? And even when I first heard it, I was like, oh, okay, like I can kind of see how this works, but it does seem like it's a little bit all in. And I'm like, turns out, no, it was just the same mistake as Team SMG, except the story's a little different. They don't actually win this map. This is, by the way, their first pick in a double map and advantage, coming in from the upper bracket finals, in the grand finals in a best of 5, and they don't win it. It's not a one-sided loss, but they do not win it. I mean, it's also not that close. I almost think 4 duelists is better in a situation like that. But anyway, you are in your most important match of your career, and a mistake like that has to have you shook. Like, it was insane. Like, when I heard that had happened and why it had happened, afterwards, I'm thinking live, I'm thinking, oh, well, it's over. Like, this sucks for these players. Then they go to Sunset, map 2, Fennel's pick. And Fennel had been retooling their Sunset with a Cypher Sage comp, and that has gotten them a hot win streak coming into this grand final. And so it wasn't looking good for RIDDLE, and alas, to every RIDDLE Order fan's fears, Fennel takes the lead 2-0. Just step back for a second and imagine you're a player in this situation. You're in the, again, most important match of your career, or at least, at the very least, your whole year, in front of a massive crowd, first time for a lot of these players, with a chance to go to an international stage and maybe even further to VCT Pacific. This is like the dream of dreams, especially for the Academy players who have never had that chance, and yet you messed up the first map, and now the momentum has gone over, and the opponents just need to win one more map out of the remaining 3. That's immense pressure. So whatever this team did between maps 2 and 3, it worked like magic, because RIDDLE strikes back in an insane show of determination, closing out 2 very close maps, 13-11 and 14-12 on Bind and Ascent, eventually taking it all the way to map 5 on Icebox, where they are able to close it out in a reverse sweep. to take the title for Challengers Japan and make it to Ascension Pacific. It is a crazy story. It's not an insane ending considering the domination they had in Split 2, but the detour they took is absolutely nutty. From what I've seen during all of this is that this team actually has fairly decent understanding of map control and how to play macro when it comes to, territorial or map play. They do a lot of pushing and pulling on attack, right? Going for actually crazy aggressive, just hard fakes deep, hard in the paint, going for baits with all their utility to force rotations out of the defenders so that they have an easier way getting in. And when it comes to the defense, they oftentimes go for very aggressive plays early on to kind of get a gauge of what the default setup is of their opponents. And then there's quite a few rounds where you can tell that there's a accurate flowchart in their heads on how to react to the opposition, to the attacker's actions when it comes to breaking setups or, throwing util, things like that. However, it's not exactly clean. The set plays aren't consistently crisp. The team play isn't anything to write home about. In fact, there are times when there's actually some gaping holes in the team play, like what angles are covering for each other and the timings. These are all mistakes that will not go unpunished at a higher level. The individuals are fun to watch. There's no doubt. I mean, the fragging is quite clean and very impressive, right? There's very just impactful, high octane highlights coming out from all of the players, and all 5 of them are very capable of clutching. It's a fun bunch, but unless you are the next OSPOS, these kinds of mechanics and advantage you have as an individual, this is a plan B, not a plan A. And I just have to mention this, right? Now, take all of this into one picture. And now think back to the grand finals. Fennel's up 2-0. Riddle order, reverse sweep. That's great. And I'm not trying to take anything away from them. But can we just mention the fact that Fennel had won both pistols and anti-ecos on bind on map 3. And then they lose that, 13-11. Then they go to Ascent their pick. And they win both pistols, both anti-ecos, and both bonuses. You have a 6-round lead. And you let it go to overtime. Now, Ascent was one of the good maps for Riddle Order, a very strong map for them. So, again, I'm not trying to take anything away from Riddle Order, but I will say that these are maps that Fennel should not have lost, especially not both of them. They were set up to absolutely lock in the match. So my point is when it comes to a higher stage, I don't know if Riddle Order is going to be given a chance to crawl back in games like that. Now, I'm not saying that Riddle Order doesn't deserve to go to Ascension, because obviously then a counter argument could be made Riddle Order also shouldn't have messed up their picks on Haven, and maybe they would have taken that Haven and things would be different. Sure, I'm not saying that they don't deserve to be there. I'm not saying that Fennel is a stronger team, because in fact, what I'm trying to say is that Fennel was maybe not strong enough to challenge Riddle Order to their fullest potential, because you're giving away maps like this where Fennel should have won. When it comes to a higher stage, one step above, one more tier above, where you're playing against the best of each region, if they take leads like that, if you're not able to close out the pistols and lock in that advantage that you can have in a game of Valorant, would you be given a chance to make a comeback like that? That, I'm not so sure. Let's talk about the key players, though, that might be a core part of making this happen. Now, again, they all deserve attention, especially this one's perhaps the toughest one for me, just because obviously 3 of these players were part of the academy program in Zeta, and obviously they have been grinding through an official program like that, and I think they've actually captured a lot of the attention all around the world for the skill sets they have shown. But I was so hyped for Caedye when I saw him at Red Bull last year that I'm going to have to put him on the spot. His peaks are solid. We saw it at Red Bull, and we still saw glimpses of it throughout Split 2 this year in Challengers Japan. In fact, when I heard that when I first saw that he wasn't the go-to primary duelist, I thought that was insane, given what he had done at Red Bull Homegrounds. Now, obviously, Solnum has proven that his jet is still strong enough, so that concern is gone. But the question now becomes if Caedye can perform consistently at a high level. The switching gears, the switching roles, it's not easy. It's not for everyone. And when playing at a higher level against tougher opponents, I think you need your inconsistencies to lock in. To me, That's Caedye. I need to see Caedye not only land 6 shots, but consistently put himself into positions to land those amazing shots when he's not on things like the Raze or a Jet. I need him to carry the same reliable X factor that Soldom sometimes shows, no matter what agent he's on, because I think that could make or break certain rounds that can help close out some of those close games that Riddle Order might have. Meanwhile, the other player I'm going to highlight is going to be JoXJo. This guy. This was his 3rd title in Challengers Japan. Once with the Reception, once with Fennel, and now with Riddle. He was part of the crew with Meteor on Northuption that took down Zeta Division to take Japan's spot in 2022, going to Masters Copenhagen. And then he was actually so close to make it to Ascension last year with Fennel because they had taken 1st place in Split 1. And then they had a really tough, close game in the lower finals of Split 2 against Scars, who eventually were the winners who went all the way to Ascension. And now he's leading a brand new squad against some of his old teammates, in fact, on Fennel, to take another international appearance to represent Japan, this time at Ascension Pacific. I remember casting his games back in Korea when he was playing for Go and Go Prince and thinking, like, he's fine, but there's nothing special. But look at how things have changed. You watch what he has done with Northuption back in the day, and you have to appreciate the fact that there was impactful IGLing, and the fact that, again, he's done it with 3 different squads to win in Japan, that counts for a lot. That's when you can say, okay, his IGLing is impactful, and in fact, it's an invaluable asset to the Japanese scene. Because, let's be honest, his fragging isn't the consistent part. He's not like top fragging every game. He's not carrying with frags. And that's probably the part that needs to lock in a little bit. Again, it's about bringing up the lower ends instead of what your peaks can look like if you want to compete at a higher level. So if his fragging can come up just a bit more, I think his IGLing, I think his calling, I think his reads on the map are pretty good and good enough for Ascension Pacific. But I wonder if he is able to lock in mechanically to make sure he can lead this squad to a higher level. Taking a quick look at the map pool for Riddle Order, I think the biggest thing to note is actually what's not on the screen, and it's going to be the fact that they were a 100% win rate, 9-0 record on Split for the entirety of Split 2. Now, this does include some of the games in the advanced stage to get into Split 2, into Challenger. So, other than that, it's a 5-0. But basically, this was like their go-to map to get into Challengers and to carry them through the main stage, the round-robin stage of Challengers, with the double duelist of Soldom and Caedye. Obviously, Split no longer in the pool, so that's a bit of a loss in their map draft. They're losing a very strong suit, something that they can always rely on as a fallback on this is our one guaranteed win, and we'll have to see if Abyss, a map like Abyss, can help cover that if they're prepared enough. Outside of it, obviously Ascent, still a very strong win rate as well, even though it's not a priority pick for them. And then it should also be noticed, while Lotus does have a 2-0 win, those are also from the advanced stage. And after that, it was kind of a near permaban for this team throughout the main stage of Challenger Split 2. So we'll have to see if, they've been retooling that because they were playing the Chamber prior. Maybe they're changing their composition. Maybe they just felt that they wanted to focus on the maps that they always could win. Who knows what the idea is. But overall, as it goes with all the winners, the win rates are all pretty good. It's just that I think there are some very, very hard-leaning choices. Oh, one other thing to note is obviously they brought out that Haven, and then they didn't get to show us what they prepared because they picked out a random composition for ping check or what they thought was a ping check. So we'll have to see, because obviously they were prepared because they picked it as their first map in the grand final. So maybe this actually works out for them, that it's now shrouded in mystery. That brings us to the wrap up for Riddle Order, and when I was starting to make this video, I was already concerned with what my conclusion would be. A lot of people are talking about Riddle Order being a favorite to win Ascension Pacific. Yes, they do get to start at the second round. They have that extra day or two to take that break, to prep against the opponent, see what they brought out at Ascension Pacific. And yes, they looked pretty good. Yes, they are very talented individually. But having seen some of the other teams, I don't know if just having decent map reads and then having individual bailout moments is going to be good enough. I think this team can win Ascension Pacific. I don't think they're an underdog. But I'll be honest, I don't know if I put them at favorites. I do think they need just a bit more cleanliness to be favorites. And honestly, I just don't know if Riddle has been challenged enough. I think they've just been challenged enough where the talent has proven that it's strong enough, that it's stronger than their opponents, and it deserves to be at Ascension Pacific. But now they have to prove once more that they deserve to be considered favorites for Ascension Pacific. That's my opinion. So I think it's a strong team. I'm excited for this team, and I do think the story's great. No matter what happens, I think especially the Academy players that came up from Zeta Division, right? So the trio of Caedye, Ace, and Yatsuka, I think they've proven themselves, and I hope to see them, no matter what, continuing on in their professional career, because I think there's a lot of room, even more, for growth for these players. And then I would say, even Solemn and JoXJo have showcased why they are still able to land these spots, even in challengers teams, with the assets that they bring. But as a package, this is a team where I'm like, okay, you got to do it for me, on your first 2 matches or something like that, to really tell me that you are favorites to win this tournament. Listen, I didn't get to watch every single game in depth. So if you've been following the Japanese scene, if you've been following Riddle Order, let me know. What am I missing? What do you want to see from this team? Or what do you think needs to happen for this team to win Ascension Pacific and bring another slot for Japan into VCT Pacific? Let me know down in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And with that, we have now introduced all 10 teams. We will be making sure to upload a quick tier list and pick'ems right before the matches begin. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to make sure you can join us for the watch parties either here on YouTube or on Twitch. That's it for now, and we'll see you at the watch parties.